Getting engaged is a moment worth cherishing. A one-of-a-kind ring that you design at Blue Nile can help your love sparkle. Just choose your diamond and setting. When you've found the one, you'll get it delivered right to your door. Finding the right engagement ring can be nerve-wracking. At Blue Nile, you'll have the expert guidance needed and a diamond guarantee that ensures you're getting the highest quality at the best price. Cherish all of life's moments and save up to 30% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at Marines.com.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
You remember them from your childhood, grainy TV coverage from Seoul or even Atlanta. They come around every 4 years. They're always the same. Great Britain used to be okay at it. Now they're brilliant, finishing a record-breaking second in the medals table in Rio. It's 2020. It's Olympic year once again. But hang on a minute. They're not always the same. In fact, this summer's Tokyo Games has new sports, even more events, and new rules. So it's not like Rio or even London. This is Anything But Footy, the Olympic and Paralympic podcast, and this is a Tokyo 2020 special, and this is the things you need to know. I'm John.
And I'm Michael, and because it's the festive season and we've had Christmas and New Year, we have decamped for the recording of this episode of Anything But Footy to the pub. And we're in the Tower Tavern in Cleveland Street, and the reason we have come here is because it's literally just around the corner from where Team GB and Paralympics GB and GB Snow Sport are based in their new headquarters, which were opened last year by the Princess Royal, of course. So we're going to go and have a sneaky look around there later, and more on that in a future episode of Anything But Footy. But for now, we've got the drinks, we're in the pub, and we're looking forward to talking about Tokyo 2020. And we always know at the Olympics, of course, there's the emergence of new stars, but as John has said, new disciplines and new sports as well.
Yeah, so there's going to be an increase of more than 30 medal events in Tokyo 2020, which is an incredible amount, but not to grow even bigger than they already are, because we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? The Olympics needs to not get too big, needs to not get too cumbersome. So what they're doing is there'll be fewer athletes with some of the more traditional sports, like athletics. It's been a lot tighter to get in. And they've been told to trim their numbers. But more than 30 more medals on offer. More gold, more silver, more bronze. That's a great start.
Yeah, I think for the IOC, there's some key things that they need to address. And they need to address it within that agenda that Thomas Butt put forward, of course. One of those key things is gender inequality, and that's been an issue. And Tokyo 2020 is looking to substantially address that, and we'll talk more in detail about a lot more mixed events that we're going to see at the next Olympic Games later on in the year. Another one, of course, as you say, is this idea that there needs to be around about 10,000 athletes, and whilst we're trying to introduce new sports, new disciplines, we can't be going up from 10, 11,000 athletes. And then when you talk about some of the new sports, the other big thing that the Olympic movement needs to do, of course, is to try and attract young people. And so the new sports that are coming in are deliberately designed, and the disciplines that are coming in deliberately designed to attract that new younger audience that the IOC is so desperate to have.
And we always know that, of course, the Olympics brings with it a lot of building work and new buildings, and I think we all know that Rio was going to be an issue with building, and it wasn't quite ready, and they were still painting it, I think, literally a few days, even when we turned up.
I wonder whether they've ever finished that brick plaza. Do you remember? Because when it rained at the start and you walked across it, they hadn't put any of the concrete in between the bricks, and as you stood on it, all the water squirted up your trouser legs. And I'd love to go back to Rio and see whether they ever finish that.
But you know that Japan, the infrastructure to ensure a smooth games, there's not going to be any issues with that. The National Stadium was used as the main stadium for Tokyo 1964 games. That's been rebuilt and totally transformed. It's virtually a brand new stadium. The opening and closing ceremonies, athletics events and football matches will be taking place there. And again, every city is different. With London, there was this huge Olympic Park where most of the events took place. But then you remember, the gymnastics was at the O2, tennis was at Wimbledon, so it was spread right across the city. What they've tried to do in Japan is have two kind of zones, and one's called the Heritage Zone, which is really where 1964 is really prevalent, and then the new Tokyo Bay Zone, where the more modern day and more futuristic for Japan. So table tennis, for example, will be staged in the old Tokyo Metropolitan Gymnasium, which is no longer really good enough as a gymnasium, and the gymnastics will be in a new purpose-built Ariake Centre in the Bay. And last year, of course, the trampolining World Championships were held in that event, so they've kind of tested and road-tested that.
It's interesting because I've kind of I see both sides of the argument. I did like, with London, the Olympic Park, and there was always a buzz about the Olympic Park. From day 1 to day 17, there was always stuff going on in the Olympic Park. It was always busy. You felt like you were at the Olympics. Slightly different in Rio because obviously the athletics was not in the Olympic Park. It was at a different stadium.
It was a good bus drive away, wasn't it?
It was. It's a quite a scary area, I felt, when you came out of that stadium late at night.
There was a shooting at one of the buses in Rio's as well, wasn't there?
There was, and a bullet through the roof of the Equestrian Press Centre as well in Rio. So we'll be hoping we don't get repeats of that in Tokyo. But I felt in Rio the Olympic Park was good in the first week, pretty quiet in the second week.
Once the swimming had gone.
Yeah, once the swimming had gone, because all the athletics was elsewhere, and certainly from a British point of view, the events, once the cycling had finished, and I know the Olympics isn't just about the Brits, but it was for us when we were there, covering it, and I think once the cycling finished, the things that were going on in the Olympic Park was basketball and some of the other sports that we didn't necessarily, volleyball, for example, have a massive interest in. So I like the way that Tokyo's kind of, I think, set things up in this kind of half and half. I think it looks on the surface as though it will be a great setup. And
we also know the marathon and race walks will be happening 400 miles north in Sapporo. So what is new? So there are 5 new sports, although some are making a return.
Yep.
And we'll talk about those in a moment. But you mentioned it about the gender equality, and one of the beauties of Olympic
inequality,
sport, or inequality,
as it has been, and hopefully this will be now gender equality.
And that's what they're trying to get at. I mean, I always thought growing up that the Olympics was pretty gender equal, but when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of it, it's like, well, why are some men doing this event and the women not doing this event and all that? So I think what they're trying to do is trying to change it. And one of the also the big things is, as you rightly say, is bringing in the youth. They want the youth market to really look at the Olympics and go, yeah, this is something that I either aspire to or I'm interested in, and I want to know who's doing a good job. And one of these big sports is basketball 3-on-3, it's called.
Yeah, and I always think, I kind of hinted at it earlier, didn't I? We have a particularly sort of British outlook on the Olympics, and Rio taught me, and we've said this before, a couple of things. So, a British outlook on the Olympics is that football's not a big Olympic sport. It was in Brazil. And I've told the story before that I was sat in a cafeteria and they switched a football match off to put a race walk on, and there was chairs flying. And I went to see some volleyball in Rio, and it was packed out because there was all this talk about empty seats at the athletics, for example. But the volleyball was hugely popular because it's a big sport in Brazil. So I think this 3-on-3 basketball, whilst it might not capture the public's imagination in Great Britain, I think it's a terrific development because, basketball is a huge sport, obviously, in America, which is so important to the IOC in terms of the television money. Pretty much funds what the IOC do. So, but it's a pretty traditional sport, and we've obviously got the men's basketball and the women's basketball as well. We've seen in the men, the Dream Team, the American Dream Team, have dominated since the professionals came in, if you like, in '92. In Barcelona, and this is a new development, and it might be something that potentially gives another nation a chance to win a medal. I think that's probably in the IOC's thoughts as well, that they maybe want to try and spread the medals out a little bit, and some of these new disciplines might help to do that. So in Rio we saw that with the sevens rugby, of course. England Great Britain got to the final, but they lost to a nation that won their first ever Olympic gold.
Fiji, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, and I think that, fantastic for Fiji. The president was there and all the rest of it. It was really good. And I think 3-on-3 basketball might present another opportunity.
It's exciting, urban and innovative, say organisers. It's the first sport that was trialled at the Youth Olympic Games has now become an official Olympic sport. Overall, there will be teams competing for a total of 4 basketball Olympic gold medals for both men and women in the main basketball, which has been in the Olympics since 1936.
Let's call it the traditional, not the main.
Traditional, and then 3-on-3. The winner is determined via a race to 21 points, or whichever team has the highest score after 10 minutes. So it's just a 10-minute game.
Yeah, it's going to be quick. It's going to be good for telly. It's going to be good for spectators. It's going to be exciting. And it's going to be easy to follow, and therefore, for the YouTube generation, which we definitely aren't, by the way, this will be something they will hopefully be able to get into.
Cycling, I think, is an interesting sport. I didn't realise that cycling is the 3rd largest in the Olympics in terms of medals. I thought it was a relatively new sport, but it's been in the Olympics since the very first one in 1896. I'd love to have seen that Olympic competition way back. But
penny farthings.
Exactly. But what's interesting with this one is they've broadened it again with a bit more of an urban feel. So they're bringing in BMX freestyle, which is, where the athletes compete, and it's referred on a park course. So there's lots of ramps and obstacles, like your local park.
You're watching that basically to try and see people fall over.
Yeah.
A bit like the reason why people watch downhill skiing, or you watch the ski racing at the Winter Olympics where they go over You're essentially, if you're not following someone particularly, you're watching that to see calamitous things, aren't you?
And it's like in Winter Olympics where they have the freestyle kind of snowboard where you go down they slide down poles and various things, and you're expecting them to come off. So that's BMX freestyle, basically like your local park. But they brought back the Madison on the track. Now, this was in the Olympics for the men. It was dropped in 2008, and it's now coming back for the men and the women. The women will do 30 kilometres, the men will do 50 kilometres, and this is the riders in each pair taking turns to recover while the other races, and each being propelled back into the race by a hand sling move.
I like that.
You've seen Cavendish and Wiggins do it, and also, of course, Laura Trott and Katie Archibald will be doing it probably for Great Britain if they're selected, and it could mean that Laura Trott feasibly could go for 3 golds at these games in Tokyo.
It's interesting because actually cycling, the track cycling, which we obsess about in Great Britain because we're so good at it and win so many medals, the programme's actually fairly limited, and actually the programme is only over a few days. But then you've got all the other sort of various disciplines, obviously with road races. And I've always thought with the road race there should be individual medals and there should be a team event. I think, because road race cycling, which I cover a lot of, is interesting because you are trying to get someone to the front of the race, whether it's Lizzie Deignan in Rio and London, or it's Geraint Thomas or Bradley Wiggins or whatever. But there's this big team working behind you, and they get nothing. And I go back to Glasgow in the Commonwealth Games, where Lizzie Deignan won the gold and Emma Pooley won the silver for England. And I said to her in the interview afterwards, I said, what brings you more pleasure, your own personal silver medal, or the fact that it was job done today that you got Lizzie to the head of the queue, if you like, to win the gold? And she went, well, my job today was to get her to win the gold medal. So that's I think an area where the IOC could maybe create another medal. But then you've got mountain biking and you've got the BMX and everything else as well. So like you say, it's a huge sport.
It is a huge sport. Swimming is also a huge sport, one of the big two, as some people would call it. And they've got 2 further new events, and these have troubled me slightly, Michael. It's a men's 800 metres and a women's 1500 metre freestyle races. Now, no disrespect to any of those competitors, and Rebecca Adlington, of course, did well in her long races, and we celebrated those gold medals, but they're pretty dull to watch. Yeah. But they are both male and female events, as we say. But trying to attract the young people, bringing in the 800 metres and the 1500 metres?
I think if you're going to try and attract young people into swimming, then you need to start doing widths, don't you?
or what the International Swimming League's done, change the lights and that kind of thing.
It needs to become a bit more of an event. I think Olympic swimming has, for me, stagnated a little bit over successive editions, and I think particularly I felt that...
Is that because the Brits haven't done as well?
Yeah, I think particularly I felt that, certainly London 2012, and I went down to the Aquatic Centre and watched it, and it wasn't quite the session or the event I was hoping for. But, as you say, because we weren't winning medals, what we have now in Adam Peaty and others is a bit of stardust, and we're going to see world records. We see Adam Peaty break world records at major championships all the time. We'll probably see more later on in the year in Tokyo. That might help, but I do think that what the ISL have done is they've really raised the game with the staging. And likewise, the World Championships in athletics last year, the staging of the medal ceremonies and stuff. If you were Tokyo and you were head of the steering group committee for medal ceremonies, you'd be watching that and ringing their light and laser company, wouldn't you?
I think you would. That's a really good point. And plenty more mixed gender events are coming in. Now, some of these aren't new to the Olympic programme, but there will be a whole lot more at the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2020, which is later this year. So double the amount in Rio. In 2016, mixed gender competition existed in badminton, which was mixed doubles. Equestrian, obviously, has been going since the 1960s. Sailing included the mixed NACRA 17 class, which is quite crucial this year for Team GB because they have a couple of competitors trying to get in one class. And tennis, mixed doubles, of course, returned in 2012 where Andy Murray and Laura Robson won a medal, and that was after an 88-year absence. So it's nothing new in the Olympics to have mixed gender sports, but what they're trying to do is try to bring in some new events for these. So now men and women competing together in perennial favourites such as swimming and athletics will be competing together, as well as archery, judo, shooting, table tennis and triathlon. So we're going to run through some of these for you. Some good ones for you. You kick us off.
I mean, I love some of these mixed relay events that you talk about because depending on how teams, and with the athletics we saw at the World Championships in Doha, depending on how teams set up, how they put the men out first, the women out first, whether they alternate them, you just kind of don't really know how that race is going to unfold. So we're going to have a 4x400 metre mixed team event in athletics. So that will be 2 men, 2 women, obviously, each running 1 lap. There's some issues. We discussed it on Anything But Footy last year about the scheduling because it's at the start of the athletics programme. So are you going to get the best 400 metres runners in there? For me, that's an opportunity, potentially, for a nation like Great Britain, where you're probably not going to win individual 400-metre medals. Target that. Could be...
So top-load it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, target that race, and say to your best 400 metres quartet, we're going to go for the relays at the start and the end of the week. And if your individual event suffers a little bit, if you have to go out in the heats, rest and recover, then, I know as an individual you want to reach an Olympic final, you want to run a PB, but there's a medal. There's an Olympic medal up for grabs in that mixed team event. So we've got mixed team events in athletics. Swimming, you say, another one of the big 2 sports. I think the cyclists and gymnasts and the others would argue that. New mixed event in swimming as well, the 4x100 metre mixed medley. Again, featuring 2 men, 2 women. Great Britain should be strong, I would think, in that. But
what I quite like about that is the fact that there is no set pattern to it, and you can have women racing against men, and not always, in the events you'd expect. So the freestyle, the breaststroke, the butterfly. It's going to be really interesting to see how and it's great atmospheres. Relays always bring great atmospheres.
Yeah, and I just think the Olympics can't stay still. I mean, that's the whole point of this entire episode of Anything But Footy. The Olympics needs to innovate. It can't just keep putting on the same show. It will no longer be the greatest show on earth if it's exactly the same every time. And different host cities bring different things to it. Rio hosted a Rio Games, London hosted a London Games, Tokyo will host a Japanese Tokyo Games, and that will be a different cultural program, and it will be very different from what Brazil did, and different landscapes, different backdrops. But the events, which is what you go and see, need to innovate as well, and I think these are, in athletics and swimming, are fantastic innovations that I think people will get excited about. And
it's good to see those, quote, traditional sports being reinvigorated as well, because it's too easy to just do it for archery, judo and table tennis.
And then not have the cojones, if you like, to go to the IAAF and Seb Coe and say, look, I know you like running around circles for 1,500 or 800 metres, but you need to do something. And I think that's an issue with sports, and athletics for me is one of those sports where actually they're a little bit inward looking sometimes, and they don't want to go out and embrace potential new audiences.
Archery, there's going to be a mixed team event. South Korea will be the ones to beat in 2020, no doubt, in that one. Judo, there's a mixed team event which will feature 3 men and 3 women, which will be interesting to see. Japan beat France when they did that at the Worlds in 2018 in the final there. Shooting, there'll be a total of 3 new mixed events in shooting. The mixed team trap, the mixed team air rifle, and mixed team air pistol. 1 man and 1 woman in each of those. And then mixed team doubles in table tennis as well. You kind of expect these things to have happened, but why didn't we play mixed doubles in table tennis? China will be the dominant force in that, but why haven't we done it?
Because no one's really, I think, looked to address the gender inequality before. I think it's probably always just been the way that we've had men's and we've had women's tournaments, and actually then when someone shines a bit of light on you as an organisation, as an event, and says, we need to address things, you start looking for more imaginative stages. The one mixed event I'm really looking forward to, is the mixed team relay triathlon. I'm a huge triathlon fan, love covering the sport, cover the World Series every year, and I think it's going to be great. We've had mixed team relays at Commonwealth Games, and England have done well, and I would imagine Great Britain will do particularly well. Opportunity from a British point of view for Alistair Brownlee to win 2 more gold medals in Tokyo.
When we spoke to Andy Salmon, the CEO of British Triathlon, he was kind of hinting he hoped he'd go.
Yeah, I think my guess from what Andy Salmon was telling us on Great British Bosses on that episode, we've got Series 2 of that coming, by the way, later on in 2020. We've got some rip-roaring guests lined up. But anyway, is that he'll definitely be in the team event, but maybe not go for the individual. I don't know. And then you could have Johnny Brownlee, who could go in the individual and the team, and he could win 2 gold medals and be like his brother. And then you've got the huge conundrum of which 2 women would you put in? Are you going to take different women for the team event than you will for the individual, because there's such an embarrassment of riches there with Georgia Taylor-Brown and Jess Learmont, and then you've potentially still got Vicky Holland, who won bronze in Rio, non-Stanford, a former world champion. There's so many good women. I think it's potentially you could put individual and team different members.
And one of the questions we got asked after we did the Great British Bosses was, well, how does the relay work? So here's how it works. You have 4 members competing, alternating woman, man. So there's no, unlike in the 4x4...
top loading of men or women or whatever.
Where you can decide who you want. No, it's woman, man. Each one completing a super sprint triathlon, which consists of 300-metre swim, 7-kilometre bike and 1.7-kilometre run, and then the fastest combined time wins. And there is that kind of handover as well where you pat on. So it's going to be a great event. We're really looking forward to that one.
You're listening to Anything But Footy. We're looking ahead to Tokyo 2020 on this episode of the podcast, and we're looking ahead at some of the new things that will be at the next Olympic Games. And we've come to the pub because it's been the festive season, so we thought where better to do it than the Tower Tavern in Cleveland Street, where if you look very closely you can see the headquarters of Paralympics GB and Team GB just around the corner.
And there are 5 new sports going into Tokyo, and Britain has a chance in at least one of them, maybe even 2, as we'll discuss in a moment, for medals looking ahead to that. 3 of them are extreme sports, is what they're being called, which really, again, goes back to what we've been saying throughout this podcast. It's about the taste and appeal of a new generation. You're trying to reach out to them. You've got baseball and softball back, and I kind of groaned when I wrote that down, because it's like, oh, seriously, not again. But it's huge in Japan.
It has to be, again, a sport that we as Team GB followers don't get excited about. Obviously, baseball in America is one of their national sports, although at an Olympic level it's different players often, and there's issues and has been issues around which baseball players will come and be at the Olympics.
They hate the fact that the World Series is actually against the world.
Yes.
In the Olympics, they have to compete against the world.
So it's been slightly different in the past to what basketball's outlook, where they will send the dream team, the dream team equivalent of the baseball team. Haven't really ever sort of come together historically. But yeah, baseball and softball, as you say, I think it's a nod to the organisers and the host nation, Japan. There'll be other strong nations there. It probably won't get a lot of coverage on the BBC. A couple of minutes with Hazel Irvine late at night.
Well, I've only just found out that softball is basically indoor baseball.
I never knew that.
There you go.
I knew it was a kind of version of baseball, but I didn't realise it was indoors.
That's basically what it is. Karate is a new sport, and again...
just going to say, actually, before we move on to karate, I was looking when we were preparing this at baseball, because originally, of course, it was going to be played at London in 2012.
Was it?
Yeah, it was originally when the original plans came out. Baseball was still at that point an Olympic sport. And
was that the Oval or something?
Regent's Park.
Okay.
I think they were going to set a sort of baseball, a temporary baseball stadium up in Regent's Park.
And how ironic, they now play baseball
at the Olympic
the
Stadium.
Olympic Stadium.
That's just one of the point I wanted to make. So, although I joked there and I was a bit flippant saying it will only get a couple of minutes highlights late on and, Hazel will be introducing it or Dan Walker, whoever has got the late shift. We saw huge crowds going to see baseball when it came to London. You bring the Major League Baseball and people in London will come and see it.
I think it's for the hot dogs. On to karate. So, again, huge in Japan, and it spread through Japan in the 1920s, so they brought it into the Olympics. There's going to be 3 weight classes in the kamaite part of karate, and there's also kata karate as well. Now, here are the explanations. So, kata is forms, and that is basically a series of offensive and defensive movements targeting a virtual opponent. So you're not actually taking on anybody. You're just doing the kind of shapes and the movements.
We're still with you, just.
Yeah, I should hope so. And the judges decide on the points. So you're trying to impress the judges. So it's a bit like dancing, but not really. Please don't come and do karate on me if you're offended by that. And then kamaite is opponents facing each other in a matted competition, and obviously you have to land blows on the target area and beat the opposition.
And I think it's really interesting that karate is coming in. Again, it's a nod to the host nation. And if you look at the development of taekwondo, that was a demonstration sport in Seoul in '88, because obviously South Korea and taekwondo hand in hand. 92, taekwondo then becomes a full-on Olympic sport, if you like. And then by 2016, who are winning taekwondo medals? Great Britain. A well-funded programme that has identified talent in the shape of Jade Jones, Bianca Walkden, Latalo Mohammed, Joe Mahama. Send 4 taekwondo athletes to Rio. 3 come home with medals. Someone finishes 4th. Karate, from a British point of view at the minute, we might be on the fringes, on the edges, but if karate gets its chance to stay in the Olympics 3 or 4 editions down the line, we could be winning medals.
And they can play Peter Cetera.
booming
out over the big speakers.
I really hoped you weren't going to bring up the Karate Kid.
Come on.
Do you think at the opening ceremony they should say, we're now going to get a nod to some of the new sports, and then as Glory of Love plays out, they bring out the Karate Kid who's now got to be in his 60s.
What was Mr.
Miyagi?
Yeah.
He's no longer with us, I don't think. So
I'd be
very surprised.
One of the greatest films of all time. On to skateboarding then. So we've got street and park.
That was a tangent from us, wasn't it?
For male and female. I don't think we'll do a film
podcast. We'll be giving Simon Mayo and Mark Kerman a run for the money at this rate.
This is what Christmas does to you. So
and being in the pub.
Exactly. You get all jokey. So skateboarding, male and female, street and park. It probably does what it says on the tin. Street-like course over stairs, handrails, curbs, benches, walls and slopes, which will be brilliant to see. And then the park competitions, more of the kind of hollowed-out course, a bit more like the South Bank in London, where you see the people jumping up and down over the curves and going up and down the bowls. And we've got a really good chance of Great Britain, of course, winning a medal in the youngest ever Olympian, Sky Brown, going to that.
Yeah, and there'll be so much attention in the build-up to Sky Brown and skateboarding at the Olympics. Obviously, if she gets in, and we've been following her quite closely. You do not see pre-teens at the Olympic Games.
She's third in the world at the moment.
And as I've said before, and we've discussed many times, it was a huge issue at the end of 2019 about safeguarding in sport and governance and issues around that. You've just got to hope that the circus, the carry-on around Sky Brown is going to be managed well for her point of view. You've got to hope that they've gone and spoken to Tom Daley and others that went to Olympics at the age of 14. Tom Daley is a great example of someone that's been in the spotlight all his teenage years, his entire adult life, and seemingly has come through the other end being a pretty well-rounded individual. and seemingly, in my experience, a pretty good guy. So, you hope that path is followed with Sky Brown. And wow, I mean, imagine what were you doing at the age of 12, 13? It wasn't potentially competing for Olympic medals, was it?
No, I think I was watching the Olympics, probably. Yeah. Obviously, medals in the Olympics are won by a hair's breadth or a thousandth of a second, but here's a sport where you can literally win by your fingertips, and that is sport climbing.
Bouldering.
Yeah, so there's different parts of sport climbing, bouldering, lead and speed combined, and there's lots of gold medals up for it. You basically run up a wall as the fastest and win, and again, it's great to see. It's quick and it's going to be exciting.
It is exciting. I've watched a little bit of bouldering and sport climbing since it came onto the Olympic programme, and it makes good TV. A little bit like that bit of Gladiators where they were trying to race up the wall
of death.
So hopefully no one will be shouting "Awooga" during it. But again, I think Britain will have people. Shauna Coxey, of course, is the British name that people associate. So there'll hopefully be competitors there, and I think it'll get quite a lot of attention, sport climbing, because it is a good television spectacle.
And the same with surfing. So they're going to be on the short boards, not the long boards, but the short boards, male and female. And of course, it's the ocean. Anything can happen.
It's outdoor surfing because there has been discussion, hasn't there, about building indoor surf centres. I think there's an indoor surf centre in North Wales, if I'm correct.
Bristol way, or somewhere around there.
And it seems to me that would be a massively expensive venue to build when you're surrounded by the sea.
Yeah, it's probably not worth for an island nation. Tokyo 2020, of course, there's going to be 20 men, 20 women competing in the separate competitions in the surfing. And it apparently was in the Olympics in Antwerp and Stockholm in 1912 and 1920.
Those well-known surfer nations. Stockholm, Sweden, Antwerp, Belgium. They're where the Beach Boys came from, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope we've whetted your appetite for Tokyo 2020.
Oh, dear.
We should have done this right at the start. We should have said cheers. It's
cheers.
Olympics year.
Yeah, it's Olympics year.
It's Olympic year.
We're in the pub. Hey.
So look, there's plenty of new, plenty of old, and revamps and spin-offs of both. And Tokyo 2020 is very much aiming to breathe new life into the Olympics. Its focus is youth and aspiration, and these new sports and categories will no doubt bring new viewers and hopefully competitors down the line. But can they knock the winner of the 100 metres on the track or the 50-metre fly in the pool off the sporting headlines? We'll have to wait and see.
Happy New Year. Happy New Olympic Year.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.